At first glance, everything about Blake Shelton feels almost untouched by time. The same easy smile that never seems forced. The same voice that fills arenas without strain. The same presence that once made millions feel like they truly knew him, even if they had never been in the same room. But sometimes what looks the strongest is also the most carefully held together. Because behind the laughter, behind the stage lights, behind the moments we all see, there are quieter moments no one ever talks about. The kind that don't make headlines. The kind that don't fit the story people want to believe. And lately, something feels different, not in a loud way, not in a way that demands attention. There was no sudden moment that made the world stop and stare, no clear turning point. It came slowly in pieces, almost like it didn't want to be noticed, a slightly slower step. A pause that lingers just a bit longer, a tone that feels heavier than before. People started to notice, not out of curiosity but something deeper, concern. The kind that sits quietly in the back of your mind. What's going on? Is it just time catching up? Is it exhaustion? Or is there something more, something that hasn't been said out loud? Because when someone spends so many years being the steady one, the entertainer, the constant presence, it becomes hard to imagine them struggling at all. And that's where the real tension begins. Not in what we know, but in what we can't quite understand. Because the most emotional stories aren't always the ones that are clearly told. Sometimes they unfold slowly right in front of us while everything else keeps moving. And now, at 49, Blake Shelton's story feels like it's carrying a different weight. Not louder, just heavier. And that quiet heaviness is hard to ignore. For years, Blake Shelton stood for something simple, something steady, something people could rely on without thinking twice. In a world that never seems to slow down, he felt familiar. A voice rooted in country tradition, yet still completely at home in the modern spotlight. He wasn't just a singer anymore. Over time, he became someone people trusted. Someone who could sit in a chair on The Voice and feel just as natural joking with contestants as he did standing under bright lights on stage. That kind of balance doesn't just happen, it takes years. Years of long tour, long nights, endless travel. Years of building something piece by piece, while learning how to stay grounded as everything around you grows bigger and louder. And for a long time, he made it look easy. But a life like that always comes with a cost, even if it doesn't show right away. The schedule alone can wear a person down, the constant movement, the lack of real rest. Late nights that turn into early mornings, a routine that never really feels stable. At first, it's manageable, energy carries you forward, momentum keeps everything in motion. Until one day, something shifts. As Shelton moved through his late 40s, those small shifts began to surface. Not dramatic enough to grab headlines, but clear enough for those who were paying attention. His presence was still there, still strong, but in certain moments it felt quieter, more reserved. Like there was something sitting just beneath the surface. According to reports, there wasn't one single event behind it, no official diagnosis, no clear explanation shared publicly. And that silence only made people look closer, because people don't just watch Blake Shelton for the music. They watch him because he feels real, familiar, human. And when someone who feels that real begins to change, even in the smallest ways, it creates a ripple. A slow, steady kind of concern that builds over time. Behind the scenes, questions have been raised about the toll of years in the spotlight. About how much a person can carry before it begins to show, even when they try to keep it hidden. And yet through all of it, one thing hasn't changed. He's still there, still showing up, still performing, still holding on to the version of himself the world recognizes. And maybe that's what makes this feel so different, because this isn't about someone disappearing, it's about someone enduring. And sometimes, endurance carries a quiet kind of weight that few people truly understand. Before anything began to shift, Blake Shelton's life moved with a rhythm that felt almost unshakable. Music was always at the center. It defined everything. From the very beginning, he built a sound that connected with people in a real way. Songs that didn't try too hard but still felt deeply personal. Stories that reflected everyday life, love, heartbreak, humor, and everything in between. Over time, that connection grew into something bigger than success. It became part of who he was. He wasn't just making music anymore. In many ways, he represented country music for an entire generation. A familiar voice people could count on. A steady presence in an industry that often moves too fast for anything to last. Then television added another layer. His role on The Voice changed everything. It didn't just expand his audience, it changed how people saw him. He became more than an artist. He became a mentor, a personality, someone who could carry a moment without effort. And for a long time, everything worked. there was a sense of balance. A rhythm between his career and his personal life, especially as his relationship with Gwen Stefani became part of the public story. Together, they felt like something unexpected but real. Two different worlds finding a way to fit. From the outside, it looked like a life that had found its perfect pace. But sometimes what looks perfect requires the most effort to maintain. Because when something works for so long, people assume it always will. They don't see the small adjustments happening behind the scenes, the effort it takes to keep everything balanced. The quiet moments where things don't feel as easy as they once did. And that's often where it begins, not with failure, but with fatigue. At first, it's barely noticeable, a slower reaction. A pause where there wasn't one before. A moment where the energy feels just slightly different. For most people, it wouldn't stand out. But for someone constantly in the public eye, even the smallest shift doesn't stay hidden for long. And sometimes, those small shifts are the beginning of something much bigger. The change didn't come all at once. It moved in slowly, almost carefully, like something trying not to draw attention. Fans started noticing little differences. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming at first, just small things that felt slightly out of place. His usual quick humor sometimes felt delayed. His energy, while still there, didn't always have the same spark people remembered. At first, it was easy to explain. A demanding schedule, travel. The natural effects of getting older in an industry that rarely slows down. These are things every performer deals with eventually. But over time, those explanations didn't feel complete anymore. Because the changes stayed, they didn't fade away. According to reports, there was no official confirmation of any serious health issue, no public statement directly addressing the growing concern. And that silence created space where questions could grow, but this wasn't about rumors, it was about what people could see. Those who had followed him for years could feel that something was different, even if they couldn't explain exactly what it was. And that feeling doesn't come from nowhere, it comes from familiarity. From knowing what something looked like before and noticing when it starts to look different. Shelton kept moving forward, he didn't step away, performances continued, appearances continued. He showed up just like he always had, but there was a subtle shift in how he carried himself, a quiet withdrawal in certain moments, a tone that felt more reserved than before, not weakness. Just change, and sometimes change without an explanation feels heavier than change with one, because it leaves space for wondering, not just what's happening, but why it isn't being said. That's when concern becomes something deeper, not panic, just a quiet kind of worry that grows over time. As time passed, the questions surrounding Blake Shelton didn't disappear. They grew slowly but steadily, in the background of everything he continued to do. Public appearances began to feel different, not because of anything obvious, but because of the attention behind them. People weren't just watching for entertainment anymore. They were watching closely, looking for signs, trying to understand what words had not explained, and in some moments those details stood out. There were times when Shelton seemed more reserved. Less reactive, less spontaneous. The humor was still there, but it came differently, more measured, less automatic. For someone known for his natural ease, that shift felt noticeable. According to observers, this wasn't about losing ability. His voice remained strong. His presence was still there when it mattered, but something underneath felt quieter. And that quietness carried weight, because it suggested effort. The kind of effort people don't usually associate with someone who has spent years making everything look effortless. Around the same time, Shelton made a major decision to step away from The Voice, after being one of its most recognizable faces. Publicly, it was framed as a personal choice, a desire to focus more on life outside the show. And that may be true, but for many the timing raised questions. Was it simply a personal shift? Or was there something more behind it, something not fully shared? No official conclusion has been reached. And maybe there doesn't need to be one, because decisions like that are rarely simple. They come from layers of reasons, some visible, some not. What matters is how those decisions shape the story. And in this case, it marked a turning point, not an ending, but a quiet transition. From constant visibility to something more selective, from always being present to choosing when to be seen. And that shift changes how people see you. Not just for who you've been, but for who you might be becoming. There comes a point in every long journey where things stop feeling routine. Where something shifts not dramatically but enough to reveal something deeper underneath. For Blake Shelton, that moment didn't arrive with an announcement. It came slowly through time. Years of movement, years of performance, years of carrying expectations both from the world and from within, and eventually that kind of weight begins to show, not through words, but through presence, Recent appearances have carried a different emotional tone, still warm, still grounded, but quieter, more reflective, like something has shifted inward. It's not something that demands attention, it asks for it gently. There are moments where he seems more focused on simply being there rather than performing for the moment. And for someone who built a career on outward connection, that inward shift feels meaningful. Not negative, just different. According to reports, there has been no confirmed serious health crisis. No official explanation that fully defines what people are noticing. But that lack of clarity doesn't take away from what people feel when they watch, because not every struggle comes with a name. Some exist in the space between energy and exhaustion, between public life and private reality, between who someone has always been and who they are becoming. And that's where Shelton's story seems to be right now, not in a place that demands answers, but in a place that invites understanding. Because even without a clear explanation, the emotional weight is real, not overwhelming, not dramatic, just steady. And sometimes that kind of quiet weight feels heavier than anything else. At 49, Blake Shelton stands in a place that isn't easy to define. Not at the height of something rising, not at the end of something falling, but somewhere in between. A place where experience meets change, where strength and uncertainty exist at the same time, where the story continues but the path no longer looks the same. And that's what makes this moment feel important, because it challenges the idea that success protects people from struggle. It doesn't, it just makes that struggle less visible. His life still holds everything people associate with success: music, recognition, a loyal audience, a meaningful personal life. None of that has gone away. But alongside those things, there's something quieter unfolding. A different kind of story, not about loss, but about adjustment, about learning how to move forward when things feel different. About understanding that even the strongest versions of ourselves don't stay the same forever. There's no confirmed crisis, no official conclusion. Just a series of moments, decisions, and observations that slowly form a bigger picture. One that feels human, because it reminds us that even the people we see as steady go through uncertain moments. Even the voices that sound the strongest can carry quiet pauses. Even the stories that seem complete are still being written. Blake Shelton hasn't disappeared. He hasn't stepped away completely. He's still there, just moving through a different chapter, and maybe that's why this story feels so close. Not because it's tragic in the usual sense, but because it feels real. And real life doesn't always come with clear answers. Sometimes it just asks us to notice. There's something about watching a long journey slowly change that feels personal. Especially when that journey belongs to someone who has been part of your life, even from a distance, for so many years. Blake Shelton's story was never built on one moment. It was built over time. Years of showing up, years of performing, years of being the version of himself people came to know. And now, as that version begins to shift, it creates a different kind of reflection. Not just about him, but about everything. Because change doesn't arrive the same way for everyone. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's quiet. And sometimes, like this, it unfolds so slowly you don't notice it at first, until suddenly you do. There's no clear explanation for everything people have seen. No single answer that ties it all together. But maybe that's not what matters. Maybe what matters is seeing the person behind the image. Understanding that even the strongest public figures are still human, still moving through life, still carrying things we may never fully understand. This isn't a story about falling apart. It's a story about holding on, about continuing even when things feel different, even when the pace changes, even when the world begins to look at you in a new way. And in that way, it's not just his story, it's something we all recognize in our own lives. The quiet changes, the subtle shifts, the moments that don't come with clear explanations, just feelings. Just time, just movement, and maybe that's why it stays with us, because it feels honest. If this story made you stop even for a second, hold on to that feeling, let it sit with you. Share what you think, what you noticed, what this moment feels like to you. Sometimes the quietest stories leave the deepest impact. And if you want to keep exploring stories like this, the ones that go beyond what we see on the surface, you can stay connected. Not for noise, but for meaning.